Welcome to this January platform of the Chicago Ethical Humanist Circle. The Circle is a democratic religious community devoted to fostering ideals in everyday life that emphasize ethics. We emphasize the ethics and humanistic values and an understanding of the conditions and issues, intellectual and social, of this modern era. We seek to learn together the art of living with reason, compassion, responsibility, and cooperation. For me, I think of it as a caring community, a group of folks who come together caring for one another to enhance life and to help each other both in the ups and downs and to celebrate the very positive features of life. Our speaker today is Charlotte Bishop, a certified geriatric care manager, president and founder of Creative Care Management that has been functioning for about 25 years in this area. Charlotte will speak to us on 5 tips for aging with dignity, with the parentheses that perhaps time is not on our side. Please welcome Charlotte Bishop.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. I'm going to be sharing with you some information that I hope that you'll be able to take with you and be able to use in your life, but also as you work and engage with your friends and in your community, have a little more information that you'll be able to use as you move along in your days. Did you know that every 67 seconds someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's? Every 67 seconds. So that means during the time of our talk today, 60 families are going to receive the notification that one of their loved ones has Alzheimer's, has dementia, has a life-changing, life-altering diagnosis that will forever alter the way they engage with the world and the way they get engaged with their family. This is what I call an accidental caregiver. Accidental caregivers are people who don't know what's around the corner, but they're going to get the call. And that call can be at work, it can be in the middle of the night, it can be when you're at a family function and all of a sudden something changes, a notification comes in that there's an accident, there's an injury, there's a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. 95 million Americans, 95 million Americans are a phone call away from their caregiver crisis. And this is an interesting statistic when you think about it. That means that's more than the population of New York, California, and Texas. 10,000 baby boomers are turning 65 every day. And so what that means is there are 10,000 families potentially waiting for the call. The call is going to come. The call is going to have them become accidental caregivers. In my experience, a family crisis doesn't make an appointment. You don't get a notice that at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, someone's going to have a heart attack. Or at midnight, someone's going to be diagnosed with dementia or brain cancer. It's going to be the call. It's going to be the experience of, now what do? Whom do you call? What does your loved one need? What are they going to be needing? And how is the future going to be changed? Raise your hand. Are any of you engaged with neighbors, friends, relatives in the community? You're here today because you're engaged. How many of you have other committees and engagements that you might be involved with? Do you belong to other social clubs, other community organizations? Anyone? Now, imagine if you got a call that suddenly you were responsible for caring for a loved one or caring for a friend who has no family. Would you know what they need? What if the call was about you? would your family and friends know what you wanted? So today, we're going to talk about what I find prevalent among many of the people that I speak with. They say, not me, not now, I don't have to worry about that, when in fact they do. The not me, not now is what gets people into trouble, because they assume that their friends and family may know what they want. They assume that everything's going to work out, but they haven't put any energy into thinking about what is that really going to mean. Several months ago, I did a presentation here and had an opportunity to speak with an older woman who had attended my talk. And she and her daughter had been here. And it was really interesting because we were chatting about the talk and her experience. And she said, I don't have to worry, my daughter knows what I want. The interesting thing, though, was that the daughter was standing directly behind her. And if you ever want to see someone with an, oh my gosh, look on their face, it was the daughter. She was like, Mom, but I don't. This is the problem. People think they have communicated, and they haven't. People think their families know, and their friends know, and they don't. Did you know that more people would rather have a root canal than have a conversation with a loved one about what their wishes are? Can you imagine? Others hope. They hope it'll all work out. They hope that somehow we're not going to worry about it. Things will take care of themselves. But the reality is, hope is not a plan. Hope is something that you can wish for your birthday, for a kind of cake you might want, or something like that. But hope does not help you plan your future. In my experience, for so many people, too often, too late comes too soon. Think about that. Too often, too late comes too soon. You think someday, I'll get to it someday. And the reality is, that someday is now, because things could happen that require attention, and assuming that someone knows what you want, and assuming that it's going to work out, is not going to be enough. Yet another example of an accidental caregiver is my own. To give you a little bit of background, 23 years ago, I was pregnant with my youngest child. My husband was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. Now I will tell you, we planned for the baby. We had the layette, we had the nursery, we had the diapers. We did not plan for brain cancer. We did not plan to be told that he was not going to live to see the baby get born. Now the reality was, I started learning very quickly how to manage brain cancer and what we needed to do, and we quickly immersed in the protocol to care for him. And the blessing was we got 3 years. But that was yet a further indication that you don't have to be old to plan. This is something that people of all ages need to be thinking about. And another quick personal point was, when our kids started going off to college, as they turned 18 and started going to college, we had them sign legal documents so that we would be powers of attorney for health care. Now, I'll talk to you more about power of attorney for health care in a few minutes, but the point was, even for an 18-year-old, you need to have a plan in place to deal with a potential health emergency, because according to the way the law works and HIPAA works, which is the, Health Insurance Personal Privacy Act, HIPAA, you just can't go and talk to a doctor about someone's care. You need authorization. So over time, both in my profession as well as in my personal life, I learned a few things that I'm going to share with you today. And you've already heard me speak about the word, and that's plan. Planning means everything. Planning can mean peace of mind for yourself as well as for your family and friends. Some of my clients are actually what we call, they're elders and seniors who are orphaned. They have no family, whether through death or having never married or never having had children. They find themselves with no one except friends to care for them. And that's an even touchier situation because they really do need to have a network, a community of people that can support them, both as they age in place, but also as life decisions start having to be made. They need people that they can count on to help them make informed decisions, because no one is an island. We can't live by ourselves. We need to be able to pull people in and trust that they're going to act on our behalf. A year ago, I published this book with Steve Steiber, co-authored it. It's How Do I Know You? A Caregiver's Lifesaver for Dealing with Dementia. Now remember, a few moments ago I mentioned about the number of people who are diagnosed with dementia. Every 67 seconds, a new person is diagnosed. So what we're finding is this is really a dominant diagnosis that people have to deal with. But an interesting thing that came about during the research, and the research was based on speaking to about 36 geriatric care managers. So those are people like me who are certified. We have a certain level of experience, professional education to work with individuals and families, navigating all the decisions related to health and lifestyle. So we spoke with these caregivers and got case studies from them. And the interesting thing that came about from that were some statistics which I'll share. Now, the dominant diagnosis was Alzheimer's, with 67% of the cases that we were talking to the care managers about having had an Alzheimer's diagnosis. 63% were home safety. Medication questions, complications, taking medication inappropriately, not taking medication, 54%. Acute medical crises, 50%. Inadequate self-care, 46.6%. Chronic medical condition, 44.4%. Financial challenges, 33.2%. And there are more, but I won't detail those here. But the reality was that all adds up to 100% and more, doesn't it? You know what that means? No one has just one issue to deal with. No one has just dementia or just financial issues. In all reality, they probably have other comorbidities, chronic health conditions, financial issues, housing issues that affect how and where they live. It affects their decisions, and it also affects their loved ones, their trusted others, in how they make decisions for them. A crisis doesn't happen in a vacuum. It rarely is a standalone event in someone's life. More often than not, there are little things happening along the way to the diagnosis, and then an event occurs that sheds a spotlight on it, and suddenly things change. Imagine how difficult it would be to have a diagnosis of dementia and be living alone. And you know that things haven't been quite right, and you know, well, yeah, you've noticed that you've left the water running, or the kettle has run dry, or you can't remember where you put something multiple times. These are the kinds of things that happen to people I work with. And so what happens is the family members or the friends will call me. I've had friends call and say, you know, my friend is really having some trouble. Can you help us with this? Can you talk to my friend about what she needs to do? I can't change anybody's life. I can't make them make good choices. But what I can do is help them get information they need to make informed choices. And I can help family members and friends and trusted others get the information they need so that good choices can be made and good plans can be made. So it brings me back to the whole idea of a plan. Some people treat plan as a four-letter word. They don't want to think about it. Last October, I had a good occasion to speak with ABC7 on their morning news show. And I was interviewed by Eric Hong and showed the book and talked about the book. And the interesting thing was at the end, Stacy Baca, and this was in front of everybody, yelled across the studio, what about my dad? How do I help my dad? And this was, and I said to her, because I was talking to a number of other people there too, this is not an isolated event. There are a lot of people who think that if I start talking about it, I'm going to invite it into my life. I'm going to jinx myself, I'm going to have a problem. And the reality is, no. If you start thinking about what you want, if you start engaging with your family about what your interests are and what your desires are, it's such an empowering conversation. And it may be one that has to happen in little pieces, little bits, but it's important to have it. So you will find on your chairs a handout that I put out for you. It's called Begin. Do y'all have one? This is an acronym that we came up with that I think is going to be very useful. You can take this with you, think about what we have here, because the word begin is essentially that. Begin. Begin to think about what your interests and needs are. Begin to think about how you want things and how you want yourself to be cared for. But also, if you take what B, break the ice. Break the ice with people that you love to talk about what their interests and needs are. But also break the ice with yourself. Think about what would you like. What if you got a diagnosis? Who would you have be able to take care of you? Where would you like to go? Which hospital? Here in Evanston, you've got some choices. Where would you like to go? Which hospital is the one where your doctor is at? Those kinds of questions and those kinds of answers are so useful because it helps you get the care you want. Not just what people think might be good and what you might like, but really what you want. And if you're trying to talk with a friend or a loved one, just say that you've been doing your own self-exploration and thinking for yourself. Maybe they might like to have this kind of conversation with you too. So begin. That's B. Evaluate the whole person. Some of us have had friends that something is wrong. Something's just a little bit off, but you don't know what. And you need to be aware of the whole person, both medically, socially. How are they engaging with the world? Has someone suddenly become reclusive when they've really been quite outgoing? Is someone having new health issues? Or are they showing signs of having health issues that they're denying and say, oh, no, not me. Think about the whole person. Think about also what their wishes are as far as housing. Some people have been told by their family members, don't put me in a nursing home. I would rather die. Has anybody either said that to loved ones or heard that from loved ones? Anyone? What do you do? I mean, this is one of those extraordinarily impossible requests and demands because there's a point in anyone's health trajectory where wishing something to be so is not the safest. And that's where the hard choices come in. And that's where, as you evaluate the whole person, you understand about your health or their health, you understand the financial situation, you understand what their wishes are in terms of care. Do they want to live at home? Do they not want to live at home? Is home too big for them? Should they really look at moving into a different kind of living environment? Guard against abuse. This is an issue that is so prevalent, it's heartbreaking. Abuse of seniors and people who are less capable of making informed decisions is very prevalent. We particularly hear about these kinds of issues at holiday time. Our blogs have articles. We've written hundreds of blogs. If you go to our website, creativecaremanagement.com, it's all the blogs are searchable. But scams against seniors are so prevalent. It's financial, it's housing, it's taking advantage of their possessions, there's theft that goes on. Be aware of someone in your orbit who may be vulnerable, who needs an advocate. They don't need to have someone take over, but to have an advocate to say, you've got some really great jewelry, or you've got a really great collection of art, or you've got a few pieces that are just exquisite. Let's talk about making sure you're insured properly for them, or let's make sure that they're stored properly. Those kinds of things that you can do to be a good friend, good neighbor, good loved one, but also it's a little bit of a protection. If you listen to your friends and they talk about, oh, well, I just wrote a check for so-and-so, and you know, they're so nice to me, they needed a new car, so I thought I'd buy them a car. That's a red flag. There are services available within the community. Metro Family Services is one that you can alert to abuse, and it can be anonymous. So that if you suspect that something is inappropriate that's going on for a loved one, it's okay to reach out, because better to be making that overture in error, but in good faith, than to find out that someone had been taken advantage of and you did nothing. Inside out, I call this the inside out piece of the begin activity. Sometimes you have to be sneaky with a loved one. Sometimes they will talk with you about what their health issues are. But again, taking a note of what their health history is. There are times with my clients where we go to a doctor's appointment and the doctor will ask me questions about their health. And I don't necessarily know the full health history. So for yourself, for your loved ones, for your friends, start making a list of the surgeries that have taken place, if there's any metal in your body. Keep a little piece of paper even in your wallet that would have the current medications that you have, if you have an artificial hip, if you have a pacemaker, if you've been in one of the wars and you've got shrapnel. These kinds of things are necessary in the event that you have to have diagnostic procedures done, and you're not supposed to have, if you go into an MRI, you're not supposed to have metal in your body. So if nobody knows, they're going to err on the side of getting you a good diagnosis and not necessarily be able to anticipate that you've actually got counterindications for that diagnostic procedure. Another aspect of the inside out is medication. People tend to store their medication in their medicine cabinets or their kitchen cabinet. So if you have a friend who's a little reluctant to talk with you, it doesn't mean that you're a busybody and you're a snoop. But if you're trying to gather information, expecting to help them, expecting to be available for them, make a list of the medications that they're on so that you have that. So that if they call you and they say, I'm in the emergency room, you've got something to go on. But also for yourself, keep a list of your medications in your wallet. Because your wallet is with you most of the time when you're outside of the house. And for we women, more often than not, our wallets are in our purses. So the EMTs, when they come to your house, you're going to know to go through your purse. So keep that information available, and it makes the healthcare process more streamlined and, frankly, more safe. N, nest. Now, when I talk about nest, we have to look at home, because so many of my clients want to stay home. And while I appreciate that, sometimes we can make home work, and sometimes it's not safe. So you have to look at home both for yourself and for your loved one. Is it safe? Is it set up so that you can get around without bumping into things in the dark? Is the lighting adequate? Are there electrical cords spread across the floor? Those are things that can cause, that we call trip hazards. But also, as far as the home is concerned, are you keeping up the house? Is it safe from the outside? Is it safe on the inside? Sometimes all of the home care becomes way too much. Now, Evanston does have programs available for low-income seniors, but the reality is not everybody qualifies. So there are ways to reach out to the community to get help with your home. But it doesn't take away from the fact that you need to think about, is this really a good place for me? So as we review BEGIN, BEGIN, it's pretty simple, but again, the idea is to help you be able to remember to start. You don't have to have it all done in a day or a week. This could be the year that you begin, so that by December 31st, 2019, you have a lot of your information in order, you know your immediate loved one's needs, you have some ideas about what you want, what they want, but most of all, you have more control. You have more power, because you're not left anticipating that call and then scrambling to deal with the crisis and figuring out what you're going to do. A plan can be a lifesaver for you. It can be a sanity saver also. It was an interesting experience a few weeks ago. I was presenting, and it was a morning meeting, and we had probably about 40 people in the room. And someone came up to me at the end and said, you know, my wife and I, we've got our finances under control, we've got our wills, we've got this, we've got that. And then he said, listening to you, I thought I had it all under control. But then he said, you mentioned a few things that made me realize that we have to go back and take a look. And that's the thing, this is a process. This is not a one and done plan. The idea is to give yourself information that you need and think about what you want, but also, again, going back to the community idea of working with your loved ones, working with your friends, working within your own organization. Who are the trusted others that you would trust to make decisions for you if you were not capable of making those decisions? So you have to break the ice. You have to begin. You have to start thinking about what all of those details are. And realistically, it can feel very, very overwhelming. I want to touch for a moment on the financial piece of the puzzle, because you might know that you want to go to Evanston Hospital, and your doctors are there, they've got your medical records, everything's set. You may have the list of medications in your wallet, so you've got that all set. You've got your insurance card in your wallet, your Medicare card in your wallet. But then the next thing is, who's going to get the call? Who's going to be the person that's going to help you in this journey? It's important to have a list of trusted others available so that you are able to have that resource and frankly have that peace of mind so that you know you're not alone. As you work to develop the plan of action, and again, the finances are a pivotal piece, often I hear from family members, Mom doesn't have any money, what do we do? Or Mom has a small pension. You need to start learning what your resources are. You need to take a look at what your assets are. And speaking with an elder law attorney is always one of my first recommendations to people. Making sure that you have your legal paperwork in order. And that would include a will, power of attorney for health care, power of attorney for finances, and also these two documents are very useful. In particular, it's called a POLST, P-O-L-S-T. It's a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. And I'll have you pass this around. This can be extremely useful because it does give the doctors clear information about what your specific wishes are. Do you want anything and everything to keep you alive? Or are you comfortable with a panel of doctors determining that there are no good options for you and that it's okay to stop treatment? This is something that you really have to ponder for yourself very personally because it is a very, very personal decision. But it can mean such peace of mind for people who are caring for you. It can also give clarity for the doctors because doctors are trained to heal. Doctors want to be able to give whatever treatment protocol is appropriate, medication is appropriate, because that's their mission. But the reality is there are points in time where you have to make the hard decision that there is no more treatment that's appropriate, and then it's okay to say, we're done. The PULSE is that document that will inform the doctor what your wishes are. It's very hard to do, but it's very necessary. You might be thinking about, well then, what's a DNR? A DNR is a do not resuscitate. And that means that under no circumstances will any life-saving measures be implemented. You need to be clear about what you want, or again, if you're helping a friend or a loved one, what they want. Because if the EMTs come and they start the life-sustaining treatment, they'll continue it, even if they don't know there's a DNR. So it's one of those tough conversations that you have to have with yourself, with your loved ones, because there are times with families that when I'm working with them where I will have, the parents will have done a PULSE, and one of the adult children will say, I don't care what it takes, I want anything and everything from Mom. Then I have others saying, no, Mom said this. So what we do is we pull out the document, and the document is Mom's voice. It's what she wants. And it's not meant to be cruel or mean. It is meant to be clear, so that the loved ones don't have the burden of making the decision. They're simply implementing the wishes of their loved one. So that's the PULSE. The 5 wishes is something that I got from Rainbow Hospice and Palliative Care. It's one of similar documents that are out there, but it's designed to serve the purpose of getting you to think about what are your wishes for your life, for your end of life. It's a thought-provoking document that I'll also pass around. And it's useful learning about what these programs or these documents offer so that you can make informed choices, and it can fuel the conversation that you're going to be starting as part of your begin plan. Now, as far as the whole plan goes, I could talk about, frankly, we could have sessions here for a week, and we still wouldn't cover everything. And I welcome the opportunity to speak with you, but I do want to wrap up with this whole idea of planning. Planning is not something that is a negative. It's not something that should be seen as a burden. It should be seen as something that can be life-affirming, because when you know what you want, or you know what your loved one wants, that's key. When you know what the home environment will support and what it won't, that helps inform decisions. When you know about what the finances are, that will also inform. Because the sad reality is, if you're going to go to assisted living, Medicare does not cover assisted living. Medicaid does not cover assisted living. Assisted living can cost between $4,000 to $8,000 a month, in cash money, and it's not covered. You might have long-term care insurance that can help with that cost, but it's real money that has to be spent. If you decide you want to be home, you still have the carrying costs for your home, but live-in care costs about $25 to $30 an hour. So it's a huge financial burden if you're not prepared. It can be a very nasty surprise if you haven't taken the time to look at what your assets are or aren't, and talk to people within the community and learn what your options are. Because there are community assisted living apartment buildings that are subsidized. So that's where you can live for a percentage of your income. But it's still cash money. It's not covered by Medicare. It's not covered by Medicaid. Again, finances. Finance will also dictate how you live. Do you live in your house? Do you go to an apartment? If you go to an apartment, do you buy it? Do you rent it? Do you bring care in? Do you try to find friends and family who can support you? Do you continue driving? If you don't drive, then you can use a community taxi program or use Uber. Are you comfortable using Uber? There are a lot of questions. And as you make your plan, it's what I call a life care plan, but a life care plan is how do you want your life to unfold? Because it's your care, it's your lifestyle, and it's needs-based. If you would like to buy a copy of our book, we've brought some extra copies today. If you would like to speak with me or one of our care managers with any questions, we offer a free half-hour consultation. But more importantly, I do invite you to educate yourselves, come to the community programs that are offered, talk to people within the community. We also have resources that I call resources for independence. If you want to give us a mailing list, we can get this to you. But it's I've given you a few home care agencies as well as moving and relocation companies that will help with downsizing, moving. How do you even organize a place that you've lived in for 40 years? They can help you with that. Elder law attorneys. I recommend that you speak with elder law attorneys versus generalists, because elder law attorneys are well versed in the ins and outs of elder law. And if you have a larger estate, they can help you title things appropriately to protect your assets. If you don't have many assets, some of them can also help you manage and work towards Medicaid. Again, information is powerful. It helps you to know what you need. It helps you to plan. I've also offered meals at home information and other services, ride services, as well as cleaning services. Sometimes it's just useful to have someone come in and help you get the house in order just so that you feel good. So with that in mind, I open up the floor to any questions you might have. I invite you to ask.
Ask the questions. We'll repeat them here so that people will be able to hear it on the mic. Are there questions? Please. Yes.
So this is a kind of specific question about having a conversation with someone who's in a state of dementia, where they say something that's wrong but is true in their world,
Yes.
in their brain. What's the best way, or how do you evaluate how to talk with them about
You
that?
live with them in their moment.
Let me just repeat
so
that.
the question is,
So
yes.
the question is, with somebody who has dementia, who does not speak always the truth, how do you address those issues that they raise?
You live with them in their moment, because realizing that their ability to process is different from yours. Cognitively, they are not aware that what they're saying isn't accurate, isn't right. And it's much easier to work with them with where they are, be attentive to what it is they're saying, but also I like to try to figure out what's the hidden meaning behind what they're saying. You know, because if someone's wanting to go home, that means that they may be missing the comfort of home, they may be having feelings of loneliness that they can't articulate, but also it's a habituation of a behavior that home is home no matter where you are. And you just simply say, I understand that soon. And that leads us into something that I call loving lies. There are those who would insist, I'm never lying to mom or dad, I'm going to tell them the truth. Fact is, that can cause more agitation, upset, and distress, and no gain. So loving lie would be if someone were to say to you, you know, oh, it's summertime, I'm supposed to go to so-and-so's for the summer. Well, you know what, that's in a couple of days, we're going to make that plan, and you're going to have a great time. And then you can shift the conversation to something else. But the idea is meet them where they are, acknowledge their upset, acknowledge their anticipation, acknowledge their sadness, and then let them work through it with you, because more often than not, except for those in the very worst stages of dementia, and that's a different story altogether, most people are going to try to rise to a conversational level with you, even if it's just one word. And if you can call to that in them still, that's where I find that you have a lovely harmony of communication, because they feel heard, when so often they're not experiencing the world as a nice place. Anyone else?
Please.
I don't know if this is the right way to ask the question, but palliative care in regards to this, end stage, what can you tell us about that? Because I've seen some abuses in that as well.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah.
Palliative care, what's the difference with palliative care, and how is it used? Is that a good rephrasing?
Pardon me?
Palliative care, and how is it used, given what your experience has
Yes,
been?
I mean, in other words, it's part of the medical field, I think. But it's become, it seems to be a bridge or as part of hospice, I
Yes.
think, but I'm not
Yes.
certain. And I'm wondering, what your thoughts about that are, or what light you could shed on that.
Oh,
Let me
sure.
just speak for a moment. There is a very clear, question is what is palliative care and how does it blend with hospice? Or does it necessarily relate to hospice? Not necessarily at all. Palliative care is care that is not directed at solving the problem. If I have cancer, you could try to take the tumor out. Palliative care is to help you live with that tumor without curing the disease. So it is a treatment, and it could be different levels of aggressiveness, but it presumes you will not solve the problem. It presumes you will have an ongoing problem. But then the question of how it relates to hospice, a person may never have anything to do with hospice.
Okay.
But you may want to
No,
remark.
or in fact, they might.
The point is,
Yes.
if not only they'll live with the disease, if you have arthritis, you're not going to cure arthritis. All treatment, in some sense, in arthritis is palliative. It'll help you to live with it better. As opposed to something like Alzheimer's disease, you will eventually die from Alzheimer's disease and related diseases. So any treatment for right now, for Alzheimer's disease, at the very best, is palliative. It certainly will not prevent that ongoing disease.
And as far as with hospice and palliative care, Barbara Bush is a perfect example. She made her wishes known. She wanted palliative care. Often palliative care is also used where no more aggressive treatment is going to be used. It's used for pain management. It's used to enhance quality of life right now. Someone may transition to hospice, and within the hospice setting, they're getting palliative care because it's pain remediation, it's quality of life focus. And once someone does enter into a hospice category, that's when they have 6 months or less to live. But what that also means is that the interesting thing about hospice is it doesn't mean a death sentence. It very well could mean that someone's going to graduate from hospice, because for the first time in a long time, they're getting the right medical care, they're getting their scheduled medications, they're getting food. And if they were living alone, not having services, not having food, not having medication on a regular basis, and suddenly they are, sometimes their symptoms don't appear quite as aggressive. So even though they may be admitted into hospice with 6 months or less to live, the reality is they might graduate and live for another year or more, and have multiple admissions into hospice. So that's the interesting thing about palliative care is care that enhances quality of life. Hospice care recognizes that end of life, you're on that path, and that it's 6 months or less.
Just, many of you know our dear friend Peter Less, who, after having a variety of nasty conditions, he was put on hospice now about 8 years ago. And then after 6 months, he said, "That's enough, I'm going off," and he's moved down to Florida to be with his children. So that it's certainly not confirmed that you're going to die. They will keep you on they provide a level of care for 6 months in general.
Yes.
And many people graduate from it, as you say.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Interesting talk, first of all.
Thank you.
I've recently been involved with a close friend who dropped into serious mental illness and including some, like out of touch with reality, and did not have any power of attorneys or permission for anyone to talk to the doctor, and under that state refused to do so because she didn't think she was sick, right? And I figured that must happen also with some Alzheimer patients who are
Yes.
older. I mean, she's not older, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the whole thing of not having that permission to talk to doctors, how things get done, how people get a guardianship situation arranged. If that's, I assume that's.
It is, okay. In a nutshell, what the question is what to do when someone lacks competence, whether it's due to Alzheimer's, dementia, mental illness, or other incapacitating diagnosis which influences how they think and their decision-making process. What happens then is, depending on where they are, if it's Alzheimer's or managed mental illness, depending on where they are in that continuum, an elder law attorney would be able to help draft documentation which would then identify power of attorney for healthcare, power of attorney for finances, and potentially even guardianship. If it goes to guardianship, that's a court process where the individual has to appear in front of the judge. And that's when the judge is going to say to them, do you know that so-and-so is petitioning for guardianship? And so with that in mind, the person might say, I don't want to have a guardian. They are well within their right to refuse, because the bottom line in the thread through this whole conversation today is that people get to choose. But what happens then with competence is, if a person is determined by medical professionals to be incompetent, that's when someone can petition to the court to be identified as their guardian, as the responsible party for making healthcare or financial decisions. It's a very extensive legal process, but one that the attorneys are experienced in, because it does happen quite frequently.
But if I'm not mistaken, you might correct this, the state becomes the legal guardian by default.
By default, or they...
So if that person is declared not competent by physicians, the state immediately becomes the legal guardian. They file papers
But
to make decisions, medical decisions, because it's felt if that person is found not to be competent. And then the state can say, oh yes, this person could have this medical procedure or have this level of care. The state is the responsible person.
Well, but are there not companies that provide that guardianship that you can contract?
Oh yes, but you have to, that's still a legal, there's still a legal road you have to go down to have that take place. And the problem is, if someone says, I'm fine, what are you talking about? That's where the physicians and the state determine that, due to the medical findings, this person is determined to be not competent. And therefore then, the state becomes their guardian. A guardian ad litem is appointed. That's an attorney who is essentially representing the individual. But then what happens is, if you wanted to be guardian for your friend or have some involvement, that's where then the attorneys would work together to identify who is the most appropriate person to be guardian or to be a decision maker for that person. It's a long road. It is.
Other questions?
Anything else?
Yes, please.
Leak on this, to continue this legal type stuff from a different angle. You referred earlier to that people can call the state anonymously
Metro Family Services, yeah.
if
Or
they
police, yes.
feel like charging abuse or neglect or something, as I understood. Well, I have to wonder, so what's the story with this anonymous routine from the standpoint of misleading or false accusations?
Oh, well, okay, so the question is, frankly, how do you know if a report to Metro Family Services or the police regarding abuse is legitimate?
Well, and how do they know?
And
How do
they
the
know?
brass know?
Well, I'll tell you how that works, because I was involved in this. I had a client who had a brother who wanted access to her financials, and it became very difficult. And so it was reported that this was happening. Metro Family Services got involved. They interviewed everybody involved with my client, including the bank where she banked. And they were able to come to a determination that found that in fact that it was a truthful report. If it's found to be not, doesn't have merit, they will find that, and then that's it. It's an inconvenience for the people that have to be interviewed, and it's an irritation, truly. However, the fact is that when they do find that there is abuse, whether it's financial or physical or emotional, or housing, that benefit exceeds the cost to the individuals who are innocent on those rare claims where there's nothing happening. Because more often than not, people are not going to report something just to be irritating.
Well, I'm not so sure that's true. Not that I have direct experience of this, but I just, given what I know of human nature. Who are the folks? Is there a board that rules on this stuff? How does this actually work?
My experience was that a social worker was assigned, and she had a supervisor to whom she reported. And then as she interviewed everybody, she had a series of questions to conduct her in her investigation. And speaking with attorneys who were involved in the case, ultimately that's how it all came to the determination, with the social worker reporting back to her supervisor, going through the assessments and the investigation that she did. The determination was that there was merit.
Well, okay. Is this social worker under the supervision of the court or of who?
They do report to the court. Ultimately, Metro Family Services, these social workers are, in my understanding is, they often appear in front of the judge. They do work hand in hand with guardian ad litems, which are the attorneys appointed by the court. So they are sort of like the eyes and ears of the guardian ad litems, but it isn't that far when you have a question of abuse or neglect. That's a matter of finding out if there's smoke, and if there is smoke, if there's fire.
There's a direct parallel, by the way, with the Department of Children and Family Services, and that is people who have charged abuse of a child. There was in a case just a couple of months ago in Wilmette where a young child was walking a dog, and a neighbor called Department of Children and Family Services, said, this child is in danger. And in fact, the family, it turns out it was a short child, and it was fully understood by the family of the parents of this child that this child was doing what they should be. And a neighbor down the block got the Children and Family Services involved. It was more than a little mess. So you are dinged for it significantly. And yes, they can be resolved, but in the meantime, it was a tremendous flare-up. So there may be benefit from these reports when you pick out abuse, but there certainly are issues where it goes in the other direction. People fighting over money.
Yes.
Money is a common issue to people fight over. Other questions? You opened up, if I could, you opened up with this issue that when somebody's born, we have all these wishes, we can make plans. We have no hesitation to make plans for a child. The day they're born, we know all the things we would like to happen, and we start planning those. A few of those, the child follows up on those plans, or we follow up on those plans, and we laugh at it when they do. We're delighted when they don't. We cringe, and they may or may not be successful in whatever they do. Later on, they go through college. We spend a couple of $100,000 these days to get them through college. And then they get into a career, and they plan that. We do all of that planning. It's almost human nature. And now you're talking about planning for the other end of life, well after we're done, presumably, with our careers, although it can be an abortive one. It can happen at any time, of course, in life. But we don't have a culture of thinking about it, even though, as one of my portable friends says, growing old is something you do if you're lucky. And that is, although people now feel growing old may not be so good, they're not so lucky, because they have all these other downsides that we've come to know about. It used to be growing old meant you had good health and you survived all the travails of life. Now growing old seems to be a major cause of worry. And you're proposing actually that we start, it's a cultural shift, to think about, you said begin, break the ice. Breaking the ice. We have a level of privacy. You could have your most intimate friends, family, they won't talk about how much they earn, where their money is, what they want to do if they get sick. So breaking ice is a little bit like different from just cracking the ice of a little, it's going very deep. We're talking about icebreakers up in the North Pole.
Yes.
You have to have social, cultural skills to do that are very different from what we've cultivated. We don't have the conversation enough to do that. How do you break the ice? What are the small steps you suggest to make that happen?
Small steps to break the ice is simply tell the person that you care about, I care, and I'd like to know this. Oh, no, nothing's going to happen to me. If you talk about what you yourself have planned for yourself, that often is a good icebreaker, because you're being vulnerable. You're sharing with them what your thoughts are, but also engaging with them the fact that you really care, and God forbid something should happen, what should you do? How can you best help? How can you best support them? That often is something that is going to be resisting. There'll be some resistance, but it's going to get heard. Because if you're going on the basis of the strength of your friendship, your relationship, then what happens is people hear that I care. And in the caring, that's what's going to call to them to respond. So it's keep at it, try different opportunities, whether it's at a dinner, whether it's having coffee at Starbucks, little moments of, have you thought about this, or what happened for this, or I heard about this on the news, and if that happened to you, what would you want? Or I thought, oh my gosh, what would happen to me? Those kinds of experiences that you can draw upon that are generally in the world, that people know about via the news, headlines, that will help you break some of that ice. But also then you got to keep it broken by continuing to ask questions.
Charlotte, let me just say, Charlotte helped me with my mom's dementia. And let me tell you also, I can't give you a percentage, but the number of times that the ice is broken for you, there is something that happens that just has to be addressed. It begs to be addressed. In my mom's case, it was 30-day notice that she had to leave the independent living facility where she was living because she wasn't independent any longer. And it was incumbent upon us to find a place for her in 29 days after we got the call, and 28, and 27. And the first trip was to go out and visit and let her know what the options were, because we did the research ahead of time. And as Charlotte often says, she's not the decision maker, she's the option maker for the decision makers. We gave her options. These are the two places where we can get you in, Mom, and this is what we can do, but I don't want to go. Unfortunately, that's not an option, Mom, but here are the two good options, and here's what I think if you want to know what I think. Here's what I've learned if you'd like to see what I've learned, and here's what we can do to make this as easy as possible and to make it as seamless as possible, because nobody likes to leave the nest as the last thing here. Everybody has a favorite chair. The remote control is on the right-hand side if they're right-handed, the left-hand side if they're left-handed. It's close to the television, it's close to the phone, and they probably even have a tray where the cookies were that they were sitting with because they were there for 3 hours yesterday. So, I mean, everybody has a nest, so how can you make that happen? But it began with giving the options to the decision maker, empowering my mother with vascular dementia to make a decision because she had still enough capability, but she couldn't creatively find the future, but she could respond to what was put in front of her, and everybody be sensitive about it. And when she kept singing refrains of, I want to go home, and my mom couldn't carry a tune in her briefcase. Anyway, so she's singing that all the way, and you have to empathize and understand this has to feel difficult. I know if I were in your shoes, I would feel this is really a stretch, but you've got us.
Right, certainly a crisis brings on decision making and breaking the ice very quickly. But Charlotte has also been helpful with us in a different setting, coming through a house and walking, and you can do this at any age, we don't have to wait till we're frail. Walk through any house, as she indicated, and point out the lighting here is inadequate, people are more likely to bump into things, this pathway is too narrow, that rug on the floor is going to break somebody's neck. You can go through the steps in your own house today and have somebody, you need somebody else to look at it other than the person who's familiar with all these items and say, of course, that's part of my house, is to eliminate a few of those. You can start doing that right away. It's very, it enhances safety. Falls are the major risk that many people experience. Yes, please.
I think something is not only individual, it's social. For instance, if you go to Europe, you go to Canada, they have a program, Medicare for all.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of worry out of people when they have that. No matter what they have, they could get a doctor. If they have no money, they could go find a doctor to take care of it.
Yes.
But we don't have it here. We have a type of government that everything is based on profit. And it will impact the insurance agencies. So insurance agencies pay off the politicians, and we don't have it.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement within our healthcare system, that's for sure. And I do agree with you that there are other countries that have healthcare that's more available. Canada, my mom lived in Canada, and she was very appreciative of the healthcare she received when she moved back to Canada. But that being said, we have a lot of resources here in the United States that are available to us. But I think that as a country, we have to move toward making medication affordable, providing individuals with the support that they need so that they can age wherever they choose. If it's home, if it's in an assisted living community, independent or assisted. We have to start the conversation as an entire country, I think, because when you look at 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day, they call that the silver tsunami. So with that in mind, what does that mean? It means this enormous wave of adults, older adults, are moving through our society, taking the medication, the medical care that we can offer, using medications that sometimes they can't afford it, so what do? They create other health care issues because they're not getting their medication. And so with the silver tsunami, we also have to look at how are we going to support ourselves, but also how do we support each other? Because taking personal responsibility for yourself is one thing, but also recognizing that watching out for your neighbor is going to be a pivotal piece of successful aging in community, because the community, Evanston in particular, has a lot of services available for seniors. And that's an important point, because not all communities have that. We have an ombudsman. She's right here. Leslie Taylor. That's a huge benefit to the Evanston population because she is an advocate. Not all communities have that. So it's getting the communities one by one to recognize the need to support their seniors. And then it's also getting the seniors to rise up and use their voice to make change happen.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
I'd like to do one more follow-up sort of thing with respect to this anonymous business. What office, I mean, with these types, somebody wants to drop a hot tip like about the kid walking the dog or whatever it is, they just call 911 and then they get routed in the case of seniors to whom? And when they get routed to whoever it is, do those folks just jot down the charges and then automatically forward the charges and this full-blown investigation is inevitable? Or is there any kind of effort to scrutinize and consider the possibility that while that case might have been an innocent mistake, there might be others that aren't.
Let me just give a brief summary. We don't want to dwell on it, but certainly the question is false claims about abuse. They're subject to the court review. Everything is subject to, they go through social workers within the state who are hired by the state, and they're subject to court review. The court can shut anything down and you can deal with that separately. Any other questions? Yes, please.
While we're still asking questions, if you could mention with the basket.
Yeah, we're going to
collection.
be passing a basket. There's no requirement for any contribution, but anybody who would like to support the Interfaith Action of Illinois, which we support and are a member of, may contribute to that.
100% is going toward the keeping the warming shelters open this winter. So
Yes.
100% of your.
Warming shelters will be open. Thank you very much, Charlotte.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Clarify, that's the
Calendar.
Interfaith Action Evanston.
Right.
Interfaith Action of Evanston.
Yeah.
Just mention the calendar.
Yes, before we finish up, there are a couple of other small points. I'd like to, this is a time for personal sharing. Does anybody have personal sharing they'd like to bring to the table?
This is me.
Yes?
Put to your thoughts our own Edie Walton. Scott and I talked to the facility today. She doesn't have much longer. We appreciate your thoughts. Scott is not here because he needed his privacy, he needed his space.
Yes. Sue Walton just shared that Edie Walton is in hospice and is very frail. Please give her your thoughts and support Scott and Sue and Edie. There is a newsletter that you should be able to see the calendar. It's available here for both the January and February events. The next event that will be coming up is this Thursday on the 17th, right here, will be ethical issues discussion at 6 p.m. And see other events going on in January as well as February. If you're new to us and don't receive our emails, please sign up at the literature table over here, and you'll find the calendars. And then I have a closing quote. I did indicate that, as you know, that Groucho Marx thought that growing old is something you do if you're lucky. But there's another perspective, and that is coming from Fred Astaire, who, as you know, is somewhat skilled, was skilled as a dancer. He said, old age is like everything else. To make a success of it, you've got to start young. Thank you very much for your being here. It's glad to have all of you together. There are various snacks here. Help yourself. Coffee and juice and a few sweets. There's so much to follow up.